Taoiseach, this weekend I met with a woman, let's call her Anna. Anna had 2 smear tests, one in 2011 and another in 2015. Both came back as negative from Quest Laboratories. A year later, in April 2016, Anna was diagnosed with an 8-centimetre tumour. Today, she's thankfully in remission, but the treatment means she can't have children, something that's a huge blow to her, a woman in her 30s, and her husband. Now, we can't adjudicate here as to whether it was excusable or not to detect her cervical cancer. But I would ask Taoiseach, why is there an aura of such confidence in smear tests created when they are in fact so fallible? And why were women with symptoms like Anna dismissed by their own GPs when the clear smear test was cited to refute their concerns? Last week, Anna listened as the head of the HSE, Tony O'Brien, stated to the Health Committee that every slide is examined by 2 pairs of eyes. He was categorical about that. Last week at the same committee, I asked doctors from Cervical Check if there's any difference between the results from the 3 labs, the public lab here in Ireland and the 2 private outsourced labs, one in the US. They said no. Now, strangely, they didn't have the figures to back that up, but those figures have since become available when you look and when you go looking on the website. And what they reveal is that over 3 years, the outsourced labs have consistently lower detection rates, and one in particular, Quest. So for 3 years, let's take 2013 to 14. I believe you took over as Health Minister during that year. But in the COOM, the detection rate for any abnormalities that were logged was 14.1. For MedLab, it was 12.4. And for Quest, it was 5.8. The following year, the COOM was 13.07, MedLab 11.2, and Quest 7.8. And then 2015 to 16, COOM 11.7, MedLab 9.3, and Quest 8.46. Now, I know there are different demographics that are cited, but you'd want some massive demographics to bring about those differences. Nearly half of the detection rate between Quest and the COOM, for example. And my question is this: why was Quest repeatedly given the contract when it consistently showed these lower detection rates over the last number of years, particularly of lower grade abnormalities? Do Quest and the outsourced labs meet the standard in the Cervical Check quality assurance document of screeners not screening more than 5 hours a day? Do technicians not screen more than the recommended 12,000 per annum or 50 a day? And why, in the tendering document that I've seen, are we not meant to give contracts to companies whose directors have been convicted of conspiracy, corruption and bribery? Yet everybody knows the history of Quest from the 1990s, making settlements of $40 million in 1 decade, paying $11 million to the US government for lies in terms of testing, and paying doctors kickbacks. Does the truth lie elsewhere in the tendering document that the most economically advantageous tender is the one that has to be accepted? And Taoiseach, would you agree that this is serious cause for concern that for-profit private companies have been handed such a vital part of women's health care in this country?
Taoiseach.
First of all, I'm very sorry to hear about Anna and very sorry to hear about her story in the case that Deputy Coppinger has shared with the Dáil, and I'm very sorry to hear what she's been through. I'm glad that she's now in remission, but obviously the consequences of her cancer will be with her for the rest of her life. I think Deputy Coppinger is absolutely correct to say that we can't here adjudicate on the issues which she has put forward. That is exactly why we've established this inquiry, a scoping inquiry which starts today, to be followed by a commission of investigation after that. It is absolutely the case that when it comes to any contract such as this, laboratories have to be up to standard before they can get a contract. The issue as to which one comes in with the best price or the most economically advantageous price or bid only arises provided those labs are up to standard in terms of the quality of service they can provide, their accuracy and their ISO accreditation. So the cost only comes into it after standards are upheld. Cost is not a factor if standards are not up to scratch. The laboratory wouldn't even be permitted to make it to the final stage of the tender. I should say, of course, I'm speaking on this as somebody who knows a little bit how these things work, but it certainly was never the case that any contract is ever run by a government minister for approval. That's not how contracts work, and it's not how public procurement work, as I know the Deputy be aware. It's also important to say that detection rates are not the same as error rates, and it may well be the case that the batches sent to different labs may not all be the same. But the whole point of establishing this inquiry is to get to the facts. We want to get to the bottom of this. We want to get to the facts. We want to put things right, and we want to restore confidence in our cancer screening. So it is a specific term of reference of the scoping inquiry established today that they will examine the tendering, contracting, operation, conflict of interest arrangements, performance information and performance management, accreditation and quality assurance of the contracted cytology labs used by Cervical Check from the initiation of the programme. So that's exactly one of the terms of reference of the scoping inquiry, that they will examine that, not just in recent years, but going all the way back to 2008, to establish whether the suggestions that the Deputy has made here in the Chamber today stand up to scrutiny and are in line with the facts. And again, I would really encourage people to give their support to Dr Scally and Dr Denton in the work they're going to do in the weeks ahead to try and answer those questions for all of us as soon as possible. And I do want to recognise the involvement and engagement of opposition spokespeople on health in contributing to the terms of reference to this inquiry last week.
Taoiseach Deputy Coppinger.
Since this scandal broke, the dogs on the street have been asking how it's good medical practice to outsource cervical screening to a privatised lab 3,000 miles away in a different time zone. And haven't we arrived at the truth with these figures? Paying its technicians a fraction of what professionals are paid here, and private for-profit company like Quest, known to cut corners. I would like you to comment on their track record and why several ministers stood over them being re-awarded the contract. And lastly, Minister, Taoiseach, I don't expect us to adjudicate on the particular case. That will have to be done elsewhere. But I do think that such big variations between one lab and another, clearly shown by this, should have warranted investigation over the years. And just lastly, research has shown that when women are not listened to, which we know they're not, because actually medical studies show that women tend to get treatment later, are subjected to more pain before they get treatment, and when you combine that with the perfect storm of privatising the screening service in this way, I think we're seeing and we're paying the price for that now.
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach.
I think, Deputy, the whole point of this in many ways is that we haven't yet got to the truth, and you're coming to particular conclusions without knowing all the facts. And what we want to is to get to the truth, and that's why we've established this inquiry, and that's why it's a specific term of reference that the inquiry will examine the issues that you raise. And I'd ask you and all members of this House to allow the inquiry to make its inquiries, allow it to look at the facts, allow it to get to the truth, and then we'll find out whether there was a failing in that regard. And I would ask deputies, in the interests of women, in the interests of their health, and the interests of not causing additional concern or worry, not to jump to such conclusions until the inquiry actually happens and we find out what the findings of that are. And again, just to inform the Deputy, which I'm sure she's aware of already, that no minister, current or past, has a role in contracts or tenders or public procurement. That's not how it works.
Thank you, Taoiseach. That concludes